welcome to episode 8 of the Golden Point Podcast, which is regulars folks and myself. And, we're just going to talk about round 1 quickly, and then after that we're going to move on to NRL Fantasy, fan questions, and I think before that we're starting off a new segment. Why don't you introduce it, folks?
The boys are introducing a fantasy segment. It's called Buy, Hold, and Sell. Basically, myself and Oscar, we're each going to list a player that we'd want to buy this week, a player that we think is worth holding, and a player that we think is worth selling.
Very interesting. I reckon it's going to be a good segment. Anyways,
let's kick off into
round 1. Moving on to Thursday night game between the Roosters and the Broncos. That was at Allianz Stadium. Now, the Roosters got absolutely smashed in that game. Fucking Dom Young scored a try in, I think, the 6th minute, so that pretty much opened the game for the Roosters, but after that, the Broncos kept scoring, and then Roosters' heads were down, and that was just unfortunate for them, losing the game 50-14. Nothing much to be said about that. We had Robert, I forgot his first name, but Toya. I believe he scored around 60 points on fantasy, and it was also his debut game, so he did really well for the Roosters. And then, so folks, you do Friday.
Moving on to the first game on Friday afternoon, we had a bit of a poo slinger with the West Tigers and the Newcastle Knights. Knights took this game out 10 points to 8. The Tigers were dominant most of the game. However, Knights somehow managed to sneak Greg Marzhew over in the corner in like the 70th minute or something. I think my play for that game is Kalen Ponga. I think a lot of the work he did, not necessarily attacking-wise, but just getting them out of their own end, is what helped the Knights grab the win there. All right, moving on to Friday night, we have the Rabbitohs and the Dolphins. Really close game. Bunnies taking it 16-14. Jamie Humphreys in the 7 jersey. He retains that this week over Lewis Dodd. He was incredible, putting up some big kick meters. Defensively, he was a really solid defensive half as well. Big shout out to Tom Gilbert, though, on return. I think he made 59 tackles in 50-something minutes. He picked up a good 65 points in fantasy as well. I think my player of the match for that Rabbitohs game would probably have to go to Jamie Humphreys, though, but I would have Tom Gilbert in a close second because he was phenomenal in a loss. Moving on to
Saturday night's game up against the Dragons and the Bulldogs. Now, that was a pretty good game. A few things actually happened there I'll talk about in steps, but the first interesting point was Tupanua. He played really well in that game. Surprise, actually. I think we had a bit of a quiet performance from Clint Gutherson. Didn't do too much in that game. But yeah, they fucking...
I think I'll give
Dragons
credit
pretty shit
to
in that
Val
game, I
Holmes
can't
in a
lie.
losing side.
Yeah.
Out at centre, he was try assist after try assist. He looked really good for his first game in the Dragons. I do expect a lot more to come from him this year.
Yeah, now that game got 16,000 attendance at Cogra. I mean, that's pretty decent. I think the stadium capacity is around 25,000.
I think 21,000 it is.
Yeah, around that. So it's still pretty good, almost filling it up for like the first home game of round 1. So that's all right.
I think the highlight of that game for me would be the Bulldogs fan copping a meat pie to the back.
That's what I was going to talk about. Yeah, the meat pie throwing. That was pretty funny.
What a waste of a good meat pie.
They did. Yeah, I know. They about cost around $10, but
in this economy, who's got money to waste?
They did apologise at the end to the Bulldogs club, so that was pretty fucking intense.
Anyways, moving on to one of the many blowouts of this week, we have the Manly Seagulls taking on the North Queensland Cowboys in a 42-12 win. Tom Trbojevic on return, he looks Dalian form again this year. Hopefully he can stay fit. I think if he can stay fit, Manly will go far. We could see a potential DCE premiership retirement tour. But Turbo was just phenomenal in that game. He was unstoppable. He was everywhere on the field. Cowboys Jackson Purdue, horrible score in fantasy. Tom Duffy scored all right, but it just overall was a pretty terrible game for the Cowboys.
Anyways, moving on to the best game of the round, we had the Storm up against the Eels. Well, not so good for the Eels fans, or actually, more news. Dylan Brown is going to Knights, so it's not too good for the Eels. But like with this game, where do we start? Fucking Pappenhausen scoring 2, Xavier Coates scoring 2, Harry Grant scoring 1, Jerome Hughes 1. So yeah, a lot of
Howard, plenty of try assist.
10 tries from the Storm. That was fucking good game. I was watching it on fucking KO. Just try after try, checking my fantasy, seeing the points go up from bloody Howarth. I had Howarth, Munster, and Pappenhausen. So them 3 fucking racking up the points. It was
quite disappointing for me to watch from a fantasy perspective. I mean, not as disappointing. But
Longy did pretty shit.
Iongi was pretty bad. I started with Jareem Buller, and then obviously he wasn't named in round 1, so I cashed him down for Greg Marzu. But I originally was going to take Pappenhausen, but decided against it due to the round 2 bye.
He got over 60 points,
back for that bye this week. But Pappenhausen put up a good 68, I think, something along the lines of that. But I'll take the 52 points for Greg Marzu at 4% ownership. We'll start Thursday night's game. We have the Knights taking on the Dolphins. Dolphins obviously have the return of Cody Nikorima and Mark Nichols. However, I do think the Knights get over the line here. Once again, it's just hard to go against Kalen Ponga, and the Knights are at home at Donald Jones. So I do have the Knights winning that one there.
Okay, so moving on to Friday's game of round 2, Warriors up against the Sea Eagles. I think Manly are a pretty strong side, and they're going to take the win on this game here.
Moving on to the later game on Friday night, we have the Panthers and the Roosters. Roosters coming in at $9.30. Not sure the last time the Roosters were priced that high to take a win. I think it's a pretty stock standard game from the Panthers here. I think we could potentially see another blowout. The Roosters they're not looking good. Chad Townsend and Sandon Smith just not really finding in the half. Obviously down a lot of their forward pack. No Victor Radley, none of the Butcher brothers. I think Penrith are just too dominant, and they take an easy win here.
Anyways, moving on to Saturday game, Dragons up against the Rabbitohs. It is an away game for the Rabbitohs. We do have Humphreys starting in 7, so I reckon he can really steer the ship in that game. And I'm going to be predicting Rabbitohs to win that game.
Moving on to the 5:30 game on Saturday, we have the Queensland Cowboys taking on the Cronulla Sharks. I think the Sharks were pretty good against Penrith in Vegas. I think as a team, they'll continue to gel and only get better throughout the year. I do have the Sharks winning this one quite easily, especially with Jeremiah Nanai being dropped to reserve grade by Todd Payton after his performance last week.
Moving on to Saturday night's game, we have the Raiders up against the Broncos. It is in Canberra, so the Broncos will have to travel quite a bit. However, I do see the Broncos winning this one. The Raiders just aren't. I don't think they're. I mean, they're all right this season, but I don't think they're going to beat the Broncos after smashing the Roosters 50-14, I think. So yeah.
I will jump in. I do think the Broncos take this one, but I do think the Raiders make it a closer game than most people will think. I think the downfall here is going to be no Joe Tarpany, so I think Payne Haas will probably just steamroll through that forward pack early on. I think Michael Maguire is doing a great job of utilising Haas in his minutes. I think Horsburgh lets his emotions get in the way, and I think the Broncos forward pack will get the better of Canberra, especially with no Joe Tarpany.
Okay.
Anyways, moving on to the Spoon Bowl, we've got Battle of the West. Parramatta Eels taking on the West Tigers. We do see Jareem Buller and RP Coruscant returning for the Tigers in this game. It'll be their first game of the season as a full strength team. After the Eels' performance last week, I think they do bounce back, but I do have the Tigers winning their first game of the season, led by Jerome Luai.
Just want to say one thing about that game there. We do have some rumours of Galvin leaving the Tigers. I'm not sure which club he's going to, but there's
Potentially
rumours saying that
Parramatta.
he wants out of the Tigers.
Lifelong Parramatta fan Lockie Galvin was let go by them in the junior years. But with Moneybags off to the Newcastle Knights, I think Galvin could be in for that 5'8" spot at Parramatta, especially with them letting go of Blaze Talangi.
It'll just ruin his career, to be honest. He should stay at Tigers.
I am excited to see Dylan Brown and Kalen Ponga together. I think that would be a pretty good spine.
Anyways, moving on to the last game of the round, we do have the Bulldogs up against the Tigers. Now, this game is the first game at Belmore for the NRL season, so I do expect it to be a big turnout. We do have big James Amadeus, shout out to him. He's going to this game, so he'd be cheering on his boys. Decent lineup from both sides. Nothing too special. But yeah, I do have Bulldogs taking the win in this game.
All right, let's move on into some NRL fantasy. I did take out number one on the ladder in our comp, in our private comp, not in the Going Point podcast. I'm sitting in about 14th. In our private comp with Just Down 8, I'm sitting in first, coming in with a solid ranking to start the season of 3,340, scored 936 points. Ideally, I didn't want to touch my team this week. However, I think Jamie Humphreys is a must-have. To anyone that can get Humphreys in without getting rid of Metcalf.
How do you fit him in? That's the thing, yeah.
You hold Luke Metcalf. However, he was the only way I could get Humphreys in my team. And I've tossed and turned about it, but I've come to the conclusion I'm going to ride the trade. I didn't really want to trade this week, but it's just too hard to pass up on Jamie Humphreys. I think Luke Metcalf's got a break even of about 38, so he won't be generating much cash, could potentially lose more cash. However, Jamie Humphreys has a break even of -6, so I do think he is a must-have because even if he puts up a lowish score this week, he's still going to generate lots of cash. Give him a few weeks, he'll be up around the 600k mark or so, which then you can use to cash up to a keeper half, which will be great to be able to cash up early in the season. So that's the one trade I'm making this week. You guys will be able to look at my team. It'll be on the screen. But other than that, I think we should move on into our new segment of buy, hold, and sell. I'll start with my three players. As I just discussed, I think the obvious buy this week is Jamie Humphreys. Great cash cow. Get him while he's cheap. It looks as if he's going to hold that 7th spot over Lewis Dodd, with Lewis Dodd being listed in the reserves. My hold for this week, I have Luke Metcalf, although I'm not holding him myself. I would like to hold him. I just have no other options of getting Jamie Humphreys in. I do think Luke Metcalf can score in the 40 to 50 range, which is pretty good for a 400k player. If he does manage to do that the next few weeks, his break even should sort itself out. I just think Jamie Humphreys will probably make a bit more cash and do it a bit quicker. But if you can, by all means, Luke Metcalf is not a trade out. He just had one poor week. And then my sell for this week, for a lot of you people that do have him, is going to be Kelma Tuolangi. I said he was a trap at the start of the season. Lots of missed tackles. Very poor performance. He's scored 18 points, I think. He's been dropped this week. So if you do have Kelma Tuolangi, I would honestly, depending on what your edge cover is like, I would do a straight swap to Jamie Humphreys. Set and forget that trade.
Okay, so moving on to the better team here. to get about 869 points. That's pretty good for me. So my buy is going to be, which I've already made the trade, is not going to be Humphreys. It's going to be Lockie Hubner. Now, an inside man, I'm not going to leak his name, but he was a part of the podcast, but I'm not going to leak his name. Anyways, he's like his, yeah, I wonder who it can be, but
almost like I had Hobno in my week 1 team.
Well, he's like, he's a good cash cow, and he's a really good player. So he's like, yeah, chuck him in your team. I'm like, why not? You have won fantasy 3 times in a row, so why not listen to you? He's way better than you, so I don't know about this year. It's gonna be different. So yeah, here's my buy. Now my hold is gonna be Pete Mamazellus. Now, a lot of people are trading him out. Let me get the exact numbers here. I believe it is 5% trading him out. So it's not too much, but he did okay, 35 points. But he will be playing the entire season at hooker, so he's going to be a good little bench player to have. And my sell would be another South player, 3 South players. The third would be Tyrone Munro. Now, I thought he'd be good, reserve cover, come in the bench sometimes, but surprisingly he got injured, so I have to trade him out, sadly. So yeah, those are my 3 players.
All right.
Moving on to fan questions.
We want
to talk about fan questions. We do want to be inviting someone at the end. We will announce that at the end though, so stay tuned for that. Inviting them on as a special guest. So, anyways, let me have a look. So we did get a lot of responses here. So we're going to start with Michael. Dogs to make the top 4.
Look, I think after
their
performance against the Dragons, I'm going to say it's a no-go. I have them finishing around 5 to 8, probably more in the top half of that, probably 5th or 6th. I'm going to say they'll get 6th. I think Manly picked them. I think Manly's got a better chance at the top 4 than the Doggies do. Doggies would definitely be in the 8. It looks as if they've taken a lot of what they learnt last year, and they've kept that ball rolling. But I do think they do have a few errors in their game that they're going to need to sort out. Got to say big credit to Kurt Mann. He is an integral player for that Bulldogs side. When he came on in the 27th minute, completely changed the game. And then he left the game, I think, in the 55th minute. But he was an absolute game changer. But I do think if the Bulldogs want to push for a top 4 spot, they're going to need to be a little bit better than what we saw in round 1.
Another interesting question from Mike Cool. How did James get those big shoulders? Why don't you tell him, mate? How did you get the big shoulders?
Lots and lots of gym. Going to the gym 6 times a week,
6 times a week.
These shoulders been put to good use playing footy every year, putting some big hits on back in the day.
Yeah, we got a lot more from Michael, but I don't know if we're going to answer all of them. Moving on to Jackson's question, we got best picks for round 3 in NRL fantasy.
I think he means round 2 there.
Yeah, I think so. I think probably Hubner or Humphreys, I reckon.
I would say Jamie Humphreys
or
far best pick. We've got 15% of people have already traded him in. If you're not part of that 15%, I would highly suggest.
Or Toya. If you don't have Toya, definitely bring him in. That was 4.60% brought him in. So if you don't have Toya, get him in your team now as well. He's a must-have, unless he gets injured.
Now, if we're talking round 3 here, I would say hold or watch. If you don't have Tamale for the Raiders, do not jump on now because there is a chance he loses his spot. next week when we see the return of Xavier Savage on that 1 game suspension. So I would watch this week. I don't think he's going to make too much more cash. He will rise in price, but I think you can wait on that trade so you're not wasting a trade. See if he's selected next week. If he's selected next week, then I would bring him in.
Yep. Anyways, moving on to last question from Sam Fowler. Why is James into minors? Why do we play the song as well? While we talk about this, we're playing the song too. So, well, why don't you tell him, mate? Why are you into minors?
I think Sam Fowler there, he's got himself a bit confused with himself there. I do hear some of the allegations that he's been up to some no good stuff there. So I think he's just trying to
Cheeky
deflect
Sam.
away from himself.
Exactly. Anyways, just want to say one thing before we finish off. Next Zoom episode, we will want to proudly invite Michael to the Zoom. You've been a loyal supporter for a long time around where Boosh came. And I did see you at the NRL fan meet, so that was good. So yeah, we'll send you the details, but you will be our special guest for next episode, and I think maybe each episode or each few episodes we invite a guest just for like a little segment at the end or something, nothing too long, just to keep it more interesting. And yeah, thank you guys for
Other than
tuning
that,
in. Yep.
if you guys have any fantasy related questions, feel free to drop a comment or DM us personally, and the boys will do their best to get back to you and give you some advice. Don't listen to us.
Nah, listen to me. Best advice out there. Not ChatGPT. And see you guys in episode 9.